Why does pop culture nowadays seem so much tamer than it did in the 1990s? I don't think at any point was Marilyn Manson the top rock star in the US. 25 years ago was 1999, and the biggest rock albums that year were Foo Fighters, RHCP, Rage Against the Machine, Blink-182, Creed, Korn, and Limp Bizkit. Also, you're comparing a pop star to rock, which wasn't the most popular genre in 1999 and is less popular now. You're better off comparing Swift to the era's boy bands, notable Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. I agree. Manson made headlines because that was his MO, but he was on the fringe of the mainstream at best. He definitely had his fans, but for the most part he was nothing more than a curiosity to most people. I was 25 years old in 1999, and while I knew who he was, I pretty much ignored him. Most people knew more about him through his rumors than his music, rumors being, he removed his rib to blow himself, and that he was Paul from the Wonder Years, etc. And Op's point about cannibal corpses and ghetto boys? Both were very obscure as it related to mainstream pop culture. I mean, who would say it's basically because more people are squares than before? I'm just going of my own experience, so this is purely anecdotal, but the younger people in my life all saw the damage drinking and drugs did to their older siblings or friends and have decided to just not touch them, plus the fact that they are just more naturally introverted by circumstance due to being perpetually online, hence they tend to relate more to wholesome art instead of all the wild shit we grew up with. It would seem the American rock and roller, the sort that thought it was cool to wake up and have a beer, as we know them, is a dying art. Gangster rappers have sort of picked up the mantle, but even they are not quite the same thing. I think we're seeing a split in the tame versus wild cohorts. On one hand, I agree with you about the proliferation of squares and wholesomeness. I think this in due part to the second civil rights era, 2008, now. It's no longer acceptable to be racist, sexist, homophobic, etc. Or to use slurs, to be bigoted, etc. And I'm for all that. But on the other, I see a huge rise in wild, or whatever the opposite of tame/square is. It's just a bit different this time. Think of the rise in the acceptability of drug use. Basically everyone I know does coke on the weekends now. It's just like having a beer on a Saturday night. Huge rise in popularity of tattoos, blue/red/green hair, facial piercings that were once considering too far or ugly, like septum piercings. Then stuff like non-monogamy, sex positivity, transgender, etc. It's very noticeable in the major cities. And I think this a big point: location matters. The suburbs and rural areas tend to be more square/wholesome, while urban centers trend untamed/wild. Though there is much overlap. The rich urban area trend more square, the poorer ghetto areas, untamed. The rich McMansion suburbs, square. Rural outbacks, wild. All merely my subjective opinion, however. It is tamer. Big media companies and labels make shit for the lowest common denominator, and that's why you're seeing a gradual dumbing down of media as general population increases. They just gotta keep selling, and it's all fads and fashion that are sold by people who sit around on boardrooms all day thinking of how to get money out of people. Because you can only stand edgy for so long before it just become tedious. What it took to shock people kept having to be ramped up as time went on, because each year what was edgy last year was so last year, except that you can only ramp it up so far before everyone is just numb. Gotta be boring and stayed for a while before anyone can be edgy or shocking again. Otherwise there's no contrast. Mass media makes profitable pablum. There were underground scenes that had teeth, many were bought out and made into pop, hip-hop, metal, punk, industrial, etc. It's hard to rebel against oneself. I was thinking about this yesterday actually. 20 years ago Britney was huge and everywhere. She was controversial for sure, but her impact on pop culture cannot be denied. I guess Taylor Swift would be the equivalent right now, and she is huge. But it doesn't seem like she has as big of an impact on pop culture. I see what you mean. Even at the time, I can remember the Boston Globe commenting that they were surprised to find the local FCC had recorded no complaints over radio stations playing the song "Detachable Penis" by King Missile. I believe there would be, now. It's possible that, back then, it was assumed that not everything was going to be family-friendly at all times. You get the opposite sentiment now. I sometimes see the idea floated that all spaces should be kid-safe. On the other hand, while people talked about Marilyn Manson a lot, other acts totally ate his lunch in terms of sales. Even in 1996, Antichrist Superstar sold about 1.5 million copies, versus Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette selling 7.4 million.